Hello, I'm going to talk about Overlord Gaming and his video he did responding to various comments left on his video. In case you don't know what is going on, Overlord Gaming is a channel on YouTube that has made comments on the topic of Epic Store and how Epic is bad. And basically I made a response video to that, and he sort of responds to the comments made on that video, among which one of them is mine. So that's why I am continuing the chain of bitching at each other on the YouTube. So without further ado, let's just jump into my first point of contention.
Instead of trying to entice players to their store with better service, more features or cheaper prices, Epic is trying to force them into patronizing their platform by removing all other choices.
It's a funny word, to force someone. As far as I know, Epic does not have the monopoly on power. I think that's still relegated to the state. So saying anyone is forcing anyone else is rather charged and disingenuous language. Nobody is forcing anyone to do anything. I was certainly not forced to buy anything from the Epic Store, so using these kinds of languages is... well, it's somewhat misleading, and I'm not particularly a fan of that. As for removing other choices, plural, there weren't choices, plural. There was choice, singular, that choice being Steam. So the choice, quote unquote, that was removed, quote unquote, was Steam. As far as it being a choice, I'm still not exactly sure if it matters where you get it from. I suppose this is the core of the disagreement that I have with all the people complaining and having an issue with this thing, is that I don't really understand what's the difference of getting a game from a certain launcher. I mean, if I go out and buy a pack of crisps in Walmart, like, there's no difference if I get it on Walmart or a local retailer or some other supermarket chain. It's still the same bag of crisps. So in that sense, I do not exactly share the feeling of dread and feeling of being screwed with just because a publisher and a developer and a retailer strike a deal.
However, not everyone thinks this is something worth complaining about. Let's look at a few comments that express this view. Well, most PC games are only available on Steam. How's that for limiting consumer choices? Did Valve ever pay publishers not to sell their games on other stores?
They didn't have to. They literally did not have to do anything of the sort because they were the only retailer doing it. Like, who would they pay to exclusively host? This is the thing. They actually did something of the sort back when they started out. They did the thing where they only allowed digital downloads from Steam of like Half-Life 2 and the games that they hosted there. To the point where even they sold like empty boxes where contained only a key. So some would say they did something of the sort, but I would say specifically they did not have to. For like 20 years they did not have to do it because they were the only one around. There was no incentive and no business reason to actually engage in any kind of publishing or retail deals with anyone. They were the only choice there was.
Did Valve ever do anything to limit consumer choice? Not that we know of.
Okay, but that is a moral argument. From my perspective, Epic is free to make any kinds of deals they see fit to make. And applying any kind of weird moral lens to the deals they chose to offer someone and that someone accepted that deal is not really immoral, just because the end result is through some consideration less than what you hope to get or what your imagination tells you should be. Basically what you're saying is that because the deal that was made between those two entities is not to your particular liking, that deal is immoral. And I'm not exactly sure how can you claim something like that with a straight face. And what it tells me is that you fancy yourself some kind of arbiter of morality of deals closed in a free market economy, which is a very odd mantle to take on. So just to make it clear, I'm not saying you have to like the deal or that you can't criticize the deal, but basically implying that the deal is somehow immoral. It's really not up to you, because inherent morality of a deal is to be judged by its effects on other people in terms of their rights being infringed. If a deal made between two entities somehow infringes or somehow damages a third party, or any of those parties making the deal in a way that wasn't discussed in the deal or somehow contravenes the law, which is another thing, then the deal is immoral. If, however, the deal is A, legal, and B, doesn't really hurt anyone or infringes anyone's rights, then you saying that deal is immoral just because it quote-unquote removes a choice, that's really wild statement to make, and it's an incorrect statement to make.
Apparently having only one choice of platform is okay as long as that platform is Steam, and monopolies are bad only when it's someone other than Valve doing it. Did Valve ever do it though?
So if I understand this correctly, monopolies are indeed okay as long as they pass the moral arbitration of you. Interesting.
Valve has never tried to bribe any publisher to make their games exclusive to Steam. Steam's dominance is not a result of any monopolizing strategy, but because it was the first distribution platform out there.
Some would argue that is a monopolization strategy,
while also being the first to open their store to other publishers to sell their games. If Steam is a monopoly, it's not because Steam have tried to make it so.
How can you really say, or how can you really judge they weren't trying to make it so when they automatically were because they are the only one doing it? Like, you cannot really judge their efforts on the basis of them not having to go through those efforts to become what they are, which is, some would argue, is a monopoly, some would call it being a market leader. So that's not really an honest assessment.
But because nobody bothered to compete with it until very recently. EA's Origin, Blizzard's Battle.net, Ubisoft's Uplay. None of these platforms open their stores to third-party publishers, with the exception of Ubisoft games being available on Origin for some time now. Point is, Steam never paid publishers to keep their games off any of these platforms, and this is why people don't complain about Steam as much.
Yeah, people are a very fickle term and a very fickle thing to consider, isn't it? Anyway, people do complain about Steam quite a lot if you care to listen. So your arbitrary subjective judgment of the magnitude of complaints is not really relevant to the fact that you deem Epic to be, again, immoral, blah, 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 the whole thing that I covered before. Yet for some reason, you consider Steam to be an immoral actor in this situation. For some reason, despite doing shady shit like paid mods. You do remember that. You do remember the thing about paid mods and how they were pushing it like hard. You do remember that. Okay then.
To make matters worse, Steam and Epic are not monopolies to the same degree.
Yes, some would even argue that Epic isn't a monopoly at all. Like, in any imaginable sense, can Epic be called a monopoly? You could possibly call Steam a monopoly, although given what definition you go by, that is probably incorrect. But you could not envision a reality or mix any kind of definition together that would result in you accurately calling Epic a monopoly. Which is why it is so baffling you would put that into the title of your video.
Even if you consider Steam to be a monopoly, the only change Epic's exclusivity deals bring is replacing an accidental monopoly with an intentional one.
Again, in no imaginable dimension can you accurately call Epic a monopoly. You simply cannot. Oh, who's this? Oh, it's little old me. Well, let's see what you have to say.
A few felt we weren't quite as harsh with them. Will you whine that Battlefield is not available on Steam?
Wait, hang on. You seem to have missed a little bit of text in the beginning there. You seem to have started in the middle. You know, the beginning when I talk about how is it a console war? You know, the thing you had in the title. What happened with that? I mean, I remember you saying something about Epic bringing console exclusivity to PC with this rubbish or something along those lines.
Exclusivity has always been associated with the console wars. Please don't bring this rubbish to the PC platform.
Yeah, why are you pretending like that criticism isn't there? Like, why are you pretending you did not in fact say this or put it in the title? Why are you pretending that this is actually factually accurate? The Epic doesn't offer any or mandate any buying cost like consoles do. You saying this is a console exclusivity type situation is factually wrong, demonstrably wrong. So why do you choose to ignore me pointing it out? Very funny, very interesting.
Will you whine that Heroes of the Storm is not available on Origin? This is not comparable to the situation at hand. Heroes of the Storm is Blizzard's intellectual property and is thus available exclusively on their platform, as has always been the case with their titles. This is not the issue with the Epic Store.
Yeah, but why is it not an issue? You haven't really explained the distinction. All you pointed out is those games are exclusive, or that game is exclusive because Blizzard owns it, or Company X owns it. Like, that's a distinction without a difference. Like, all you pointed out is this is exclusive because XYZ. Okay, but it's still an exclusive. So why is exclusive from Epic bad, and why is exclusive from Blizzard good, if both are exclusives? Like, is the exclusive I was under the impression it's the exclusive itself that is the problem, right? The lack of consumer choice. Is that not the issue? Because if you're going to say that exclusive from Blizzard is okay because they own the IP and they own the game, but when Epic does it with someone else's game that they have made a deal with, that they have agreed to exclusively make it available on Epic Store, that is bad, then what you are in fact saying is that it's the morality of the exclusive. It's the morality of how the exclusive came to be. That's the problem. It's not the exclusive itself. It's not inherently problem with the concept of exclusivity. It's the moral consideration that went into it, making it an exclusive. So again, I will circle back to the argument that I made before. This is a moral issue. This is a moral argument you are making, that there is some moral deficiency with Epic and in the way they conducted the deal. Which, again, I will refer back to my original argumentation. You are not the moral arbiter. You are incorrect to state that deals made in a free market environment, if they do not infringe on the rights of others and are not illegal, are not immoral and cannot be immoral.
Nobody complained about Fortnite or Unreal Tournament being exclusive to the Epic launcher. They are Epic's games, and of course they would need Epic's launcher.
Why is that matter? Of course. I don't think that Epic is mandated to release Fortnite on their own launcher. Like, there's no law saying they have to do that. There's no like moral dictum that says they have to do that. They simply chose to do it. And so because them self-publishing was a choice they made, then how is that choice in any way different to them offering a deal to someone to exclusively host their game? Because the end result is the same. In both cases, the game is only available on a single store. And whether it is a Blizzard that does it, the self-publishing thing, the end result is also the same. The game is available on only a single platform. What is the distinction there? What is the difference? Like, I know what's the answer. Like, the answer is the moral consideration. And again, it is simply incorrect for you to state this.
Consumers only started complaining after Epic got third-party publishers to remove their games from a competing platform.
Okay, but if it's the removal that is the issue, then surely the ire should be directed at the publisher, because it's the publisher that has previously promised deployment on Steam, and it is the publisher that has agreed to an exclusivity deal. Why is Epic at fault for offering such a deal? Like, surely this, primarily the blame must lie with the people that have created this situation, as in first offering it on a first one platform and then removing it. Like, the removal itself is not problem or in any way a failing of Epic. Even through your lens, even if I adopt your morality, then the blame, the culpability lies with the publisher, because they created the situation. The removal, that's something you can only blame on Deep Silver. Epic cannot be blamed for this in any imaginable way. And that is even with your ridiculous moral lens.
A platform that said games had already been advertised on. I'm certain if Blizzard, EA or Ubisoft started paying third-party publishers to take their games off competing platforms, consumers will be outraged all the same.
Yeah, well, that is an easy and a convenient assumption you can make because they are not, in fact, stores. They are self-publishing platforms. So that's irrelevant. And furthermore, outrage does not justify itself. Just because people are outraged does not mean they have a valid or just reason to. Some people just like to be outraged for the sake of being outraged.
So far, they haven't done so, and hence Epic remains the focus of customer ire. As for the commenter's other example, Battlefield is EA's franchise and is thus exclusive to their distribution platform, Origin. This wasn't always the case though. A decade ago, EA used to distribute their games on Steam. That changed after EA launched Origin in 2011, removing Crysis 2 from the Steam store and turning it into an Origin exclusive. This move sparked some consumer criticism, with players complaining about Origin lacking features that Steam had.
And somehow we managed to survive.
This is why I don't think the proliferation of launches is all that bad. This is why I don't think the existence of the Epic Store is a bad thing. In fact, I appreciate it as long as it adds to consumer choice.
Okay, but your appreciation or any kind of subjective moral valuation you can place on Epic and their dealings is entirely irrelevant, whether it is actually moral or immoral.
But so far, it's doing the exact opposite. It's removing a choice that existed previously.
Were you able to play the game on Steam? No, you weren't, because that was done before the game launched. So what was removed was not the choice to play the game on Steam. What was removed is to, in effect, buy the game on Steam before you're able to play it. Or pre-order it, basically. So even in the terms of what was actually removed, the ability to pre-order was removed from Steam. Well, I guess eventually to play it on Steam. But again, that's also an eventually. Like, you weren't able to play it on Steam one day and then you weren't the other day, like, right? So that's also not exactly a highly valuable thing to lose, I suppose. But far be it from me to decide an item's value to someone else, because then I would be doing what you are doing. But I will say that even if I concede the point that something was removed, like a choice was removed to play a game on Steam, then all that still rests upon recognizing that playing a game on Steam and playing the game on Epic, playing the same game on Steam and playing the same game on Epic, are two entirely conceptually different things. You have to conceptualize the game as being different by merit of which launcher you use to launch it, which is very odd. I can't say I agree with that, because back to my idiotic example with the crisps, it's really only the delivery mechanism that was changed. Or to put it in another idiotic analogy, it doesn't matter which thing a nuclear warhead was taped to, whether it is an ICBM or a bomb dropped from a plane. It both ruins your day if it lands on your face. So I don't necessarily concede the point that launching a game from Epic and launching a game from Steam are distinctions with such a great difference so as to merit accusations of being scammed, frankly. Although I suppose you can say that the feature set that the Epic Store offers is far inferior to Steam's due to it being a fairly new endeavor. So I could understand that, but again, given the fact that it is okay for all these companies to self-publish on their own platforms that vary in feature sets and people will consider inferior or superior to an arbitrary set of other launchers, given how that is okay, then Epic and Deep Silver striking a deal that their game will be published on Epic Store and only on Epic Store is no different.
When a disgruntled gamer confronted Epic's chief, Tim Sweeney, about this, here is what he had to say. Is there a consumer right to buy any product in any store of your choosing? Yes. Considering Metro Exodus was previously advertised to be coming to Steam in 2019, while you may argue that Steam pre-orders were honoured, physical editions that were advertised with a Steam logo were not. Instead, shipping with an Epic key in place of the promised Steam code.
Okay, that's nice. But how is that an answer to the question, do you have a right to buy a Whopper and a McDonald's? Do you have a right to buy anything at any place you imagine? But the answer is obviously no. So I don't know why you said yes and then went on a weird tangent about the pre-orders being on Steam that was then removed. Like, how is that relevant to the question, do you have a right to buy anything anywhere? Well, the answer is obviously no. So what is this? What are you doing? What are you talking about? Like, this is entirely an irrelevant point to the question at hand. So I'm going to put this down as failed to answer.
But Tim Sweeney disagrees. Indeed, he thinks consumers have no such right.
Well, they obviously do not have. What are you talking about? Like, are we living in an upside down land? Okay, if what you're saying is true, I can walk into a fucking flower shop that is down the street and ask them to get me a fucking Toyota Corolla. Stop making up dumb shit and pretending it makes any kind of sense.
Stores compete on selection, as well as price and features. This is the same Tim Sweeney who rallied against UWP in 2016 and again in 2017, saying, "The thing that I feel is incredibly important for the future of the industry is the PC platform remains open, so that any user without any friction can install applications from any developer, and ensure that no company, Microsoft or anybody else, can insert themselves by force as a universal middleman and force developers to sell through them instead of selling directly to customers." What exactly is the Epic Store doing with Metro Exodus?
Striking a deal with a publisher in terms of digital distribution rights. That is what they are doing. They are striking a deal with someone. It has no bearing or effect on the PC platform being an open platform. Why he was rallying against UWP is because that is a different, separate, closed programming interface that would force the game to be available only on Windows. And that's what he was complaining about. And I'm sure you know this because you made a video about UWP. And so you know what it is, how it makes games unavailable on other operating systems, and how it actually reduces, how it actually goes against the ethos of PC. So this is a false equivalency. Him saying UWP is bad does not make him a hypocrite if he then goes on to conduct business in this open platform without making it in any way close. Notice that that PC is the platform that is open. Epic Store is not the platform that is supposed to be. It's not even a platform. It's a digital front. It's a digital vendor in a free platform. So him conducting business in a certain way is not equivalent to creating an API that would go against the philosophy of the platform itself, locking it to a specific operating system and locking it to a specific API of that operating system.
Oh yes, inserting themselves by force as a universal middleman.
They are not inserting themselves by force, and they are not universal in any imaginable way. You yourself go on to bitch about the low selection there is on the Epic Store. Only a bunch of games is there available only. And that is a point of criticism you have that you for some reason level alongside the fact that it is only 3 months old. And apparently also alongside them trying to expand the selection through means you do not approve of. Like, this is amazingly double thinking.
And forcing developers to sell through them instead of selling directly to customers.
Deep Silver selling directly to customers would look something like a Blizzard launcher or Origin or Epic before it went open. The criticisms of UWP is them being the middleman on the level of operating system. Epic Store and Steam and any other distributor is on a higher level than the operating system itself, because they are features of the operating system. They run on the operating system, so they are a level above that. So as far as them being a middleman, yeah, there are a middleman, but there are many middlemen if you consider the entire PC ecosystem. Like, Microsoft is middleman of every single game there is, because you play games on Windows most of the time. Or even Linux is a middleman in terms of if you play games on Linux. Nvidia is a middleman because or AMD is a middleman when you use their graphics card, or Intel is a middleman if you use their CPUs, or fucking MSI and Asus are middlemen if you use their motherboards. So there are many middlemen in the PC ecosystem, which is a function of it being free, open. So they are just another layer. The difference between UWP and Epic Store in terms of being middleman on the road of me playing a game is that UWP creates certain low-level restrictions that make the product made for them more closed, I suppose. There's a thing that you can make an argument that if a game was never going to be released for the Linux operating system, then using the UWP API is practically irrelevant. But then again, the UWP API creates a lot of issues for the interoperability of the game with other programs like the overlays and stuff like that. So in that way, the game is less usable than a normal game that would potentially be available or releasable on Linux as well. Although I suppose you could make just completely different API integration with Linux. I'm not sure if the UWP deal or releasing a UWP game was subject to any exclusivity deals. I don't actually know that. But if it wasn't there, you could possibly, feasibly, just create a different branch of the game that wouldn't use UWP at all, and all the code would be replaced with the POSIX calls of Unix or Linux. So to bring this back to earth, UWP is, a part of it is a storefront, a part of it is a distribution mechanism, but also it is a closed API that reduces the options you have as a developer for the game in terms of integration with the other applications and possibly even distribution on other operating system. What Epic Store is just the distribution mechanism, nothing more. It is a distribution mechanism situated on an open platform. So it is not in any way comparable. Well, it is falsely comparable to UWP, but again, the equivalency is false if you try to make the equivalency. You can compare it, but it's not strictly equivalent.
It's okay when Epic does it.
Glibness does not help your arguments, because as far as I am concerned, they are all shit up until this point.
Okay, to clarify, developers aren't forced to sell exclusively through the Epic Store.
Too bad you already mentioned it about 10 times that they are being forced. And that Sweeney is literally Hitler for forcing people to do stuff.
But they are highly incentivized for that exclusivity.
You are really, really grasping at straws at this point.
UWP games are not just exclusive to one store. They are also exclusive to one operating system, Windows 10. On the other hand, though, Microsoft has not yet enticed third-party publishers to pull their games off of other stores.
You know you have reached peak hot take when you argue that making games exclusive to a single operating system is morally more justifiable than engaging in free enterprise.
So far, all UWP exclusives are former Xbox exclusives that Microsoft has brought to Windows 10. Forza, Gears of War, and Halo.
What about Quantum Break?
Specifically that we forgot to talk about the Epic Store's missing features, shady terms, and the prospect of Tencent spying on customers. The Epic Store is a new platform, so it could have been forgiven for missing features found in more established platforms, if it hadn't started poaching games off said platforms.
So let me get this straight. Epic can be forgiven for their store not being feature complete as Steam is, up until the point where they start offering exclusivity deals to bring over publishers from that more feature complete platform. Then their lack of features cannot be forgiven any longer. Do I understand that correctly? Very interesting.
That being said, the Epic Store is a work in progress and will no doubt incorporate many of the features it's currently lacking. Indeed, they have already implemented an offline mode and have announced they will publish a roadmap soon. Perhaps they should have waited until their store had all of Steam's features before they started to poach games off it.
Well, if only Tim Sweeney had someone like you to advise him. Damn, now that I think about it, why don't you start a store to compete with Steam? You will do it correctly and morally right. In fact, nobody is preventing you. Go out and make the morally suitable store consumers deserve. I'm sure you won't get bored outrage mob up your ass for meaningless bullshit.
Or better yet, Epic should have made exclusivity agreements with games that had not yet been announced to be coming to Steam.
Well, hold on there a second. Because that would mean that it's not Epic's fault. Because it was not Epic that made Deep Silver put their game on Steam. Deep Silver put their game on Steam because they wanted to put their game on Steam. And then they decided they will agree to an exclusivity deal with Epic. If that situation, the situation that is currently going on, is morally incorrect, but the hypothetical situation of an exclusivity deal between Epic and some hypothetical developer company that has not yet put their game on Steam as pre-order, that would be morally correct. Therefore, from those sets of facts, I can only conclude that Epic is not at fault here. Because if exclusivity deals themselves are not the thing that is morally questionable or morally reprehensible or whatever moral judgment you care to make of it, then by subtracting latter from the former, the only difference is that the game existed on Steam. And that is not fault of Epic, Deep Silver is at fault. Great, so from what has been presented, Epic Man is no longer bad.
That way they could have avoided any accusations of poaching.
I am sure a man who has made videos about piracy is aware of the propagandistic aspect of using words like piracy, when in fact it has nothing to do with pirates and exists only to serve to create association fallacies. Then you should recognize that using words like poaching to describe exclusivity deals is equally fallacious.
This is what Discord did when they launched their store in 2018. They didn't have any games removed off a competing platform, and consequently have not received much, if any, criticism over their exclusives.
Yeah, well, people don't really associate their store with the Discord brand. To many people, Discord is just the communication program. The store doesn't really enter people's mind. And generally, people are ready to give Discord a free pass on shady shit, like them doing weird stuff with the data they collect.
Epic had over 2 months to learn from Discord's tactful strategy.
I'm just going to point out yet again that all this is a moral argument.
Had they done so, they would have given gamers far fewer reasons to be upset with the Epic store.
Well, I would claim that they do not have any fucking reasons at all at this point, so I guess that's a matter of opinion.
I understand why so many are distrustful of Epic given their recent practices. For example, just look at their terms of service.
Oh, I like this part. This is the part where you start talking about stuff you have no idea about. Not implying you necessarily know about things you talked about until this point, because I remain entirely unconvinced by your argumentation. Nevertheless, a dude on YouTube who's called YouTuber Law has made a sort of kind of analysis of specifically the terms of service of Epic and Steam on how it is basically standard practice. I will put his video in the description and just gloss over your assumptions.
There are still a few who would have you disregard all of this because of Epic's generous revenue split that they insist benefits developers.
No, I will have people disregard what you say because A, you do not know what you are talking about in terms of the terms of service as presented in the video, and B, all your argumentation revolves around some far-fetched morality that you insist and you would have people believe is absolute and self-evident. Well, it isn't. And you have made no compelling arguments to show me that it should be or that it is.
It doesn't take long to find where they get this argument from.
You being really bad at arguing?
The Epic CEO himself.
Oh, right, I nearly forgot Epic Man bad. You know, your self-defeating arguments nearly made me forget about it.
Multiple stores are necessary for the health of an ecosystem. When there's only one, their natural tendency is to siphon off more and more of the revenue. This is not true. 1 week before the launch of the Epic Store, Steam announced a new revenue agreement that gave developers a larger share of the revenue as their games sold more copies. For all sales between $10 million and $50 million, Steam's cut would drop from 30% to 25%.
Oh yes, I'm sure indie developers will be thrilled that once they reach the $10 million profit mark, their revenue share rises by 5%. Because everyone knows it's a myth that all the AAA publishers have created their own storefronts.
Beyond $50 million, Steam would take just 20%.
Just 20%? Well, sign me up for that shit.
Although I can't help but think this percentage drop should be reversed, with titles that generate lower revenue being able to take advantage of a higher percentage return.
Alright, calm down, Ocasio-Cortez.
This would substantially help lower-tier developers and independent developers, with more money coming back in their pockets for future development and expansion.
Hey, do you know what would help developers even more with future development and expansion? If Steam would drop the revenue share to 12%. If only there was someone who did that!
All developers recognise this because their businesses are being crushed under the weight of these increasing store taxes. This is why devs have been super enthusiastic about the Epic Store. For users, I get that it's yet another launcher, and if you have Steam installed, you'd prefer to just use that. But if you want way better games to be built in the future, then please recognise what good this store can do. Steam takes 30% and Epic takes 12%. That's an 18% difference, and most devs make way less than an 18% profit margin. First of all, developers don't handle costs, revenue and profits. Publishers do.
Are you really going to suggest that the revenue stream is completely and entirely decoupled from the process of developing games? Are you really going to do that? Because you're not helping yourself.
If you want an example, you need not look further than Metro Exodus, developed by 4A Games and published by Deep Silver. It was the publisher, Deep Silver, who made the unilateral decision to remove the game from Steam to make it an Epic exclusive.
You know, this is about the third time you self-defeated your own arguments you made previously, in the same video, no less. If Deep Silver was the one that made the unilateral decision to make it an Epic exclusive, then how is Epic the absolutely morally reprehensible party in this whole situation?
It is the publishers, not the developers, that benefit from Epic's revenue model.
Yeah, I can see how being able to continue developing and being employed is not entirely a benefit to the developer. Sure thing, man. Carry on.
Furthermore, there is no guarantee that the extra revenue will be invested in the developer. Nothing stops the publisher from pocketing the extra profits.
This is such a simplistic fairy tale socialist-like vision of how companies and businesses actually work. What will they possibly do with the extra money? Oh, I know, they will buy Ferrari and snort coke off hookers' asses.
Indeed, I don't see why it's assumed publishers have their developers' best interests at heart.
That's how capitalism works. You don't need to have their best interests at heart. Mutual cooperation brings mutual benefit. Like, that's how capitalism works.
If you're one of the people who think this, just look at the list of developers EA has killed to see how much developers truly matter to their publishers.
Okay, well, don't work for EA, I suppose. If you are going to use EA as the standard all of the developers adhere to, then I don't know, you're basically saying that every single publisher is just as bad as EA, which is incidentally the worst publisher out there.
That being said, there are developers who publish their own games, with Coffee Stain being the most relevant example. This is the only scenario where the developers benefit from Epic's revenue split. Is this benefit passed on to the consumer though?
Yes, it is passed on the consumer in form of there being a game for the consumer to buy, which there previously wasn't, and possibly would not have been if it wasn't for the margin Epic offers.
No.
Oh, right.
Our last video analysed all games common to Steam and the Epic Store, and found prices were identical across both platforms for all games but one.
You know what? I will join your class action lawsuit suing Epic for not offering prices you would like them to offer.
The singular exception was Metro Exodus, which had its price cut by $10 in North America. There was no such price cut for consumers outside this region. Aside from Americans who bought Exodus, consumers have seen no benefit from the generous revenue split Epic offers developers. This is not due to Steam. A response to our last video pointed out that Steam does not forbid publishers from selling the game for a cheaper price on other platforms. They do forbid selling Steam keys for a cheaper price, but that wouldn't apply to the Epic Store, which uses Epic keys. It is publishers who have chosen not to pass the price difference on to consumers, as is their right.
Yeah, but from what I gather listening to you, rights are quite secondary to being morally correct.
Why then does Epic keep touting their revenue share to consumers?
Probably because Tim Sweeney is an idiot that believes people would actually understand the concept of them being able to play games that would otherwise not be able to play because of the razor-thin margins in the game development industry. That is entire Tim Sweeney's fault.
Do they expect consumers to be happy about a benefit they never receive?
Yep, it's lollipops or bust.
Worse yet, why is Sweeney using this revenue split to justify paying publishers to remove their games off competing platforms?
I don't think he's justifying it because he does not feel it needs to be justified. Possibly because there is no justification needed.
I suppose we could be happy for the few developers who directly receive the 88%, even if we see nothing of that benefit, as long as it wasn't at our expense. Sadly, that is not the case.
I did not pay anything and I want my money back.
The Epic Games Store charges additional fees for processing payments from certain sources. Why? Because it's the only practicable way to operate a 12% fee store in those developing countries. Or so Sweeney says.
Yep, you got him. He's buying hookers for all the money he pockets or something.
Not only do these consumers see no discount from Epic's new revenue model, they actually see a price increase. It is telling that Epic has not been able to demonstrate one benefit that their store brings to consumers, because there isn't any.
Okay, don't use it.
The Epic Store is a publisher-centric platform, to the detriment of consumers.
Dude, this is such a simplistic, completely unsophisticated view of things. This is so unlike you, dude. Like, you actually make intelligent videos. What the fuck is this garbage, dude? Like, fucking snap out of it.
The conclusive proof of this is Epic letting publishers opt in to let customers review their games. Sweeney says this was done to prevent review bombing, but it's obviously designed to let publishers decide to stifle criticism before it's even written.
Well, it doesn't exactly stifle criticism, since that criticism can still be made off-platform, can't it?
This also serves as a secondary, insidious purpose as another incentive for publishers to make their games exclusive to the Epic Store.
I'm not exactly sure about insidious, given how they have to entice them somehow, given that they have no selection. Or rather, their selection is quite shallow, as you have pointed out.
How, you might ask? If a publisher knows their game is flawed and yet decides to proceed with their release, launching the game on Steam will allow players to leave honest, uncensored reviews directly below the buy button. Reviews that warn potential buyers of the game's shortcomings.
Or where people lie or complain about meaningless bullshit.
If, on the other hand, publishers release their game exclusively on the Epic Store, they can opt out of reviews and so deprive customers from leaving feedback on the product page.
You autistically screeching at people selling you a game is not exactly a human right.
A place most, if not all, potential buyers are bound to see. Of course, a game that has not opted in for reviews will be a huge red flag in and of itself. To what extent casual consumers will take notice remains to be seen.
Oh wow, it looks like this problem you invented in your head is actually self-solving. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's clear where Epic's priorities lie, and it's not with the consumers.
Dude, you can play this animation however many times you like, it still doesn't make your arguments completely fucking dogshit.
It's good that at least a few developers benefit from their terms, but we should never let that blind us to what Epic's terms mean for us.
Yeah, it means for us that you don't know how to actually interpret law.
As consumers, we should look out for our own interests.
Yes, that does not include any sort of collectivization of interest by you or anyone else. My interests are my own. You don't get to decide for me what my interests are.
Because nobody else will.
Isn't it entirely a miracle how capitalism was able to increase the living standard by several orders of magnitudes over 300 years, when apparently nobody else will? Ominous music. Whereas it's the end of the video, I'm really wondering why you did not react or respond to my reply to your comment on my response video. I've made a video unlisted now because it's dogshit quality and I did not edit anything, so I'm hoping this will be somewhat better. But when you go around picking out all these comments to respond to, it's very interesting to me that you would not respond to my reply, given how I know you know it exists, because it was in response to my video. It's very interesting that. Anyway, I will link the comment, this specific comment, into the video description, as well as all the other relevant links. So whoever's watching this, thanks for watching, and goodbye and good night.